Hello, hello. This is Allison Zamuda. How are you? Hopefully you are live on here. I'm looking for Jill Thompson as well as my co-host. So if you can join the conversation, if you can go to the top left corner where you see group chat, and you can enter in your name in the group chat. So we will get started in a few moments, and hopefully Jill will join us soon. Can you hear me? This is probably just me. Hello, you can hear me? And if you can respond, that would be fabulous in the question and answer box. Tried to iron out all the kinks, and that hasn't worked yet. So I will try to connect with folks through email as well. Okay, and you can see me and hear me. That's fantastic. So I'm actually going to get started in 1 more minute. This session is really going to be more me talking than Jill talking. So I want to connect in a minute or two, and that's going to be the plan. So the best laid plans, unfortunately. I also want to continue to communicate for you all that you can go to the learningpersonalized.com/webinar-series, and that's where all of the sessions are posted, all of the materials. I'm going to be uploading the YouTube videos a little bit later on in the week. So if you've missed a session or two, that would be a great time for you to catch up. I also want to give you a heads up that I am thrilled to be presenting with my good friend, Benna Kalick, on dispositions of learning and the connection to persons. All right, so I am seeing Benna, is that right?
All right.
And Jill's joining us as well. Okay.
I can't find the chat box. It's not showing up.
Okay. So the chat box is on the upper left-hand corner of the screen, Benna?
Yeah, it's not showing up. I'm looking.
Okay.
I don't think they can, well, I see in the questions Ann Jolly has joined and she said she can hear us.
Yes. And it's great, I can see both of you. Not really sure how that happened, but that's fantastic.
I'm not sure either. I had to get off the computer and go on my phone because the computer wasn't doing it.
Okay. So I want to also communicate to you, Benna. I just made a quick announcement that I am so thrilled that you're going to be my co-host next Tuesday at 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time to talk about the connection between personalized learning and habits of mind. But this session is really grounded in the design elements of a personalized learning experience. So we're going to move to the slide set now. These slides are going to be available on learningpersonalized.com/webinar series. And we'll also post them on Twitter as well. All right? So Jill and I are going to rock and roll. So I'm going to share the slides right now. And the intention is that some of the slides are a little bit cumbersome to read. So the idea of sharing concrete examples is embedded throughout the slides. So ideally people will go back to the slide sets and take a closer look at those examples. But this is the essential question for our conversation for the next 20 minutes. So how do we design task parameters that measure and motivate student learning? I think when it comes to the design of a personalized learning experience, we're trying to make students, give the students the opportunity to have them co-create with us. So the notion of task parameters is carefully chosen. We're not trying to design a full-blown set of directions where teachers are taking up all of the airspace and thinking for students what they're expected to know, to demonstrate, and what form that demonstration would be in. So when we're thinking about task parameters, we are starting to open up flexibility and adaptability so that we can navigate with students to have them create a learning experience that they are excited and intrigued and they find worthy to engage in. So when you're moving to the next slide, it really identifies the major personalized learning elements when it comes to the design of a particular task. So disciplinary outcomes, I know Jill wants to describe something in relation to that, and then we're going to continue to move on.
Yeah, we're just, with disciplinary outcomes, remember when you're doing a personalized learning environment that this is a continuum and that you are working with some teachers that might have a harder time with a subject-specific goal. So giving them more of a standard-specific goal will help them move along in the continuum to help them feel more comfortable as they are moving along. So that's one thing we just want to state. And throughout this, we'll give you some tips of how it is, you can start teachers off and move them across along on that continuum to be where it's more student-driven.
So this is a good moment to talk about this as a continuum of design. So when you're thinking through this, try to make sense of an element can actually be in a minimal student input mode, but another element can go all the way to the right for student-driven. And again, we're trying to honor the type of personality and experience that both teacher and student have. Some folks need to enter into one element at a minimal student input moment, and others can actually venture into the some student input or student-driven territory. Let's talk about disciplinary outcomes first. And you'll see that minimal student input, the teacher establishes what outcomes are expected to be measured. And that will drive the specific content and skills that are described in the personalized learning task. As you move from left to right, you'll start to see that students can do some level of selection and determination of what they want to explore or do a deep dive into from a subject area moment. So this is a common example. It's a first grade math test developed by folks in Virginia Beach, Virginia. So the disciplinary outcome is very specific. The capacity to describe a location using vocabulary, explanation, and tools. So you're thinking about positional words. You're also thinking about non-standard or standard units of measure. But the personalized learning task is, again, authentic, but also something that students can be engaged and invested in, not only in their capacity to develop a set of directions, but also to record and re-record to make sure that the directions can be followed by an audience member.
And again,
yep, good.
I was going to say, and again, this is where you could take that task, and to help teachers feel more comfortable, you could say, okay, we're going to address 1.MD 1 and 2 so that they, again, feel more comfortable.
Yeah, and when you're also thinking about this particular task, you can see this is very focused on the first grade math standard that Jill just cited, but also you can start to see the elements of the English language arts state frameworks in here as well. So the notion of recording through the lens of it being publishable, but the other part is that you're starting to have students revise their text based on not only feedback, but also on the larger goal or purpose that it was intending to do. So the second piece on cross-disciplinary outcomes are about the contemporary learning skills or habits of mind, and this is something that Ben Akalik and I will talk about more next week, to try to think through what are those contemporary learning skills or dispositions. So when it comes to thinking about the big 4 C's, or when it comes to thinking about what local school districts really care about, they're trying to not only come up with a list of titles like critical thinking and communication, but to be in this minimal student input really means that teachers and school community members have had the opportunity to make sense of what critical thinking is across subject areas and across grade levels. As we're moving to the right, students can then start experiencing development within a particular skill or disposition. And then the student-driven mode is having students really start to think about and identify what capacities, what cross-disciplinary outcomes are valid here based on what this task is asking me to do. So here's a concrete example from work that I'm doing in Manchester, Connecticut. Here are their capacities. And again, this slide set will be available on learningpersonalized.com, so you can read it in a little more depth. But the development of this took about a day to really think through what problem solving is and what creative thinking is in a way that's as valid for a first grade teacher as it is for an 11th grade teacher, and as valid for a math teacher as well as an art teacher. So when you're thinking about a health sciences example, this is a high school science performance task grounded in biology, but also has algebra and English language arts associated with it. And when you're looking at this particular example, you're really starting to see that there is a significant amount of critical thinking and problem solving and communication in these two major bullets. There are other elements that can be in play as well. So self-direction and task management is always significant, especially on a personalized learning task of this magnitude where students have to think through a timeline and an action plan. The third element we're going to talk about is task. So task, when you're thinking about it moving from minimal student input, where the teacher or the curriculum may specify a given performance task, or a computer can generate an idea for a performance task. It's something that definitely requires students to apply their learning to a novel or complex situation, problem, or challenge. So that's the baseline for minimal student input. As we're thinking about moving to the right, the example that we just looked at is in that some student input category, where the teacher really defines the parameters of personalized learning. When it comes to a student-driven task, this is the opportunity where students can pursue any areas of passion, to think about the development of an idea or a design, to really dig deep into a problem or an investigation of their choosing. So that's the continuum around task. And I know Jill wants to make a comment about the nature of tasks and cross-disciplinary.
I think it's just important for teachers, again, on that continuum as they're trying to move across, is that, you know, they don't have to start with all the different topics or subjects. Starting off with just 2 connections is a good start for them. So if they have a connection with math and science or reading and social studies, having them start off with 2 so they don't feel overwhelmed with all the different tasks and the different subjects helps them move across the continuum, and as they feel more comfortable, they'll add in more pieces and they'll see how naturally it comes together.
So in relation to this task, I wanted to share another example on the true cost. And this was developed by a high school team, really led by the mathematics department. So when you're looking at this particular task, the goal is to determine true costs and reasonable estimates. So there are 4 major topics that students can pursue, like a natural disaster or raising a baby. But when you're thinking about making this task go down to lower grades, you can also start thinking about the true cost of owning a pet, whether it's a rabbit or a dog. I think the idea here is that we need to think through true costs in relation to longer periods of time, but also thinking about true cost of things that are absolutely overwhelming. So the notion of raising a baby and the notion of a natural disaster really is in the right spirit. You can also start thinking about the true cost of how much snow budget that cities and municipalities need to have in places like New England, where they've been absolutely hammered with snow over the past year or two. So really thinking through math in relation to economics, in relation to social norms and social practices, but also in relation to the numbers being big. So the next element that we want to talk through is audience. So when you're looking at audience, from a minimal student input, it really means that even if the teacher is simulating a role, there's still the primary audience for the work. And while it may be interesting or compelling to have students experience a simulated audience as the teacher once or twice, it definitely gets old over time. So the theory here when it comes to audience is really trying to tap into authentic audiences. And there are a ton of great examples in the Learning Personalized book to share and think through examples with you. As we're starting to move from teacher as primary audience to the right, the authentic audience can be done in pretty much one of two ways. One way is to have authentic audience be on the formal end, the formal presentation, the celebration. You can have audience members from the school body and from the community to sit in and be experts, to be evaluators, to be judges of the work that the students have done. But the second piece is really thinking about making authentic audience as part of a dynamic interplay where the audience gives feedback and guidance to the students so that the students can continue to improve the work. So if you think back to that first grade example where the students are recording directions from the main office to a given location in the building, by having that recording in the office, and then the guests are using that recording to get from point A to point B, it gives a level of feedback that not only makes the students thrilled that they're adding value to somebody else's life, but it also gives them clarity on where they could continue to improve the set of instructions. So the audience here is interviewer, and again, you can take a look at reading this after the presentation is over. But again, I wanted to continue to emphasize that students can engage with audience all the way through the design of the task, as opposed to it just being something they're doing at the very end.
Yeah,
and Jill, do you want to give an example?
Yeah, I was just going to say one example could be some of our students were doing a Genius Hour project where they their passion was really about dance. And so they wanted to do a dance routine or teach others to dance at a local senior citizen home. And so they had to really think about the audience, one, being in wheelchairs, but then going and talking with them and seeing what moves they could do was a way to also bring in audience as well.
So we're moving on to the fifth element, which is feedback. And again, feedback here, we're moving from minimal student input, where the teacher is control over the feedback cycle. The student submits their work, and the teacher provides informal and then formal feedback to help students continue to improve the quality of their work. We're then moving into some student input, where the teacher is not the only source of feedback and guidance. And then in student-driven, the student now becomes more in control over who they are seeking feedback from and what feedback and guidance moments they want to take advantage of, and which ones they think are less important or not the kind of message or conclusion they were trying to draw. So the last is evaluation. The notion here is thinking through how can we generate a score for student work. And when you're thinking about generating a score, the vision here from a student-driven point of view is that students and teachers arrive at a common conclusion together based on their initial evaluations of the work independently, but they're engaged in a conference to continue to evaluate the strengths and the weaknesses of the work, and they're aligning it to the descriptors. That's very different from minimal student input, where the teacher generates the score. They may ask students about doing an initial reflection, but at the same time, the teacher is still very much in control over the scoring experience. And the last part is some student input, where really students are expected to do some type of self-reflection, not just as a reflection statement, but also evaluating their work on the same scoring rubric as a way for teacher to actually understand what the student's perception is to continue to move into that student-driven piece.
Yes.
So I wanted to share the... Jill?
I was just going to say yes, and again, to help teachers go along on that continuum is starting off with just having the student self-assess themselves and then move along to them. Taking those small steps helps.
So this is the last slide I want to share, and that this is an example of a presentation rubric that was designed by a high school English department to clarify what students are expected to do in relation to a presentation. But you're also starting to see some unique features of this particular rubric. So one unique feature that I hope you can see is that there are clear criteria, the titles in the first column, but also reflection questions underneath that to promote clarity of what this criteria is really asking me to do. The second piece from a student's point of view is that you're starting to see the purposeful language of pronoun usage. So it's I and my, because it's my student, it's my work, as opposed to it being done generically. The third piece that you can start to see, especially when you're reflecting on it a little bit later, is thinking about the friendliness of this rubric. So these teachers work very hard to make sure that there's not dense language, but also very descriptive language. So it took about 2 to 3 to polish this rubric. And again, it's not just a 9-12 rubric. They also developed K through 8 rubrics in conjunction with this presentation rubric. So they're starting to see a broader continuum of how students are expected to present, still along the same lines of these 5 criteria, but they're starting to increase sophistication over time. All right, so that is the presentation for this evening. And again, would love to hear your questions, your comments, whether you want to connect with us on Twitter or you want to connect with us on the sidebar questions and answers. And again, tune in to the 7 o'clock in the evening on Tuesday session with Ben Akalik and myself, thinking about the connection between personalized learning and habits of mind. Jill, any parting pieces of advice?
No, just that, again, reiterate that the Learning Personalized book really helps and walks you through all of these steps. So if you want more in depth, that's a great place to go to.
Yep. And again, when we're looking ahead toward the final session, session 5, Jill and I are going to have a conversation of, so how do you lead the change? And not just in the system structure, but also thinking about what you can do to help support your teachers. All right? So thanks so much, and looking forward to connecting with you. Take care.
Bye.